Night had settled thick over the massive train station, and every passing locomotive cut through the darkness, like a metal beast searching for something it could not name. Beneath the vibrating platforms, where dust rose with every gust of wind and echoes bounced endlessly through the concrete tunnels, a tiny abandoned kitten slipped between shadows with the fragile precision of someone who had already learned that one wrong step could end everything. On his front paw he carried a thin, pale scar, his first anchor object, a quiet reminder of the night he escaped wheels that scraped the ground inches from his body. The scar tingled whenever the cold grew stronger, marking time like a wound-shaped compass, guiding him through a world that had never made room for him. The rhythm of the station had turned into his invisible enemy, a constant social force pressing against him. Hurried footsteps, indifferent voices, doors slamming without warning, workers who moved too fast to notice a life trying to exist under their boots. Still, he survived by following 3 silent rules: run when the rails trembled, hide when the metallic whistle echoed far away, and wait for scraps when warm food scents escaped from the late-night cafeteria vents. But tonight something shifted. A man walked differently, slower, present, breaking the hostile rhythm of the place. He worked every midnight shift, carrying tools that smelled of rust and sawdust, his second anchor object, always in his hands. The kitten watched him the same way he watched the trains, cautious, calculating, prepared to flee. Yet something about the man did not align with the usual pattern of danger. The man paused. The man looked. The man listened. And when a roaring locomotive approached, shaking the very foundations of the station, their eyes met in a moment so still it felt like the world stopped vibrating. A single question hung between them, quiet but unstoppable. How long can 2 lonely souls ignore the pull of companionship before the cold makes the choice for them? Some encounters only happen when 2 kinds of loneliness finally recognize each other in the dark. Before we begin, if this story finds a place in you, if you still believe that love can come back even after everything, hit like, subscribe, and comment the city and state you're watching from. That's how I know where these stories are finding their way. This story begins inside an American train station, carved by cold lights, restless echoes, and a relentless routine that rarely forgives hesitation, yet still holds room for small miracles that unfold without noise, changing entire lives in the quietest way possible. A tiny stray kitten had claimed the station as his unwilling kingdom, building shelter out of forgotten boxes and learning to navigate narrow corridors between rails as if they were dangerous roads meant only for the desperate. Every night was a silent battle against hunger, cold, and the overwhelming noise that tried to swallow whatever courage he managed to gather. Across those same nights, walking those same trembling floors, a solitary maintenance worker followed his midnight route with an old lantern, the third anchor object, glowing faintly in his hand. That lantern lit corners nobody else cared about, including the delicate paw prints that appeared and vanished near the maintenance room door. What neither the kitten nor the man knew was that the station, loud and merciless as it was, had been tying their lives together for weeks, one searching for scraps, the other searching for something he could not name, both trapped in routines forged by survival rather than choice. On the night when storms gathered beyond the rooftops and the tracks shivered under an approaching freight train, the kitten stepped into the open too early, and the man raised his lantern just in time to see the tiny shape trembling in the cold glow. And in that instant, everything began to change. The lantern's weak circle of light trembled across the concrete as the man stepped closer, boots grinding softly against scattered gravel. The kitten froze, every muscle locked, breathing thin and fast, eyes wide enough to reflect the entire station behind the man's silhouette. A drop of cold air rushed past, carrying the scent of metal, oil, and something warmer. The man's jacket, worn from years of night shifts. The kitten didn't understand why that scent made him hesitate instead of fleeing. The man crouched slowly, placing the lantern on the ground so its glow widened across the floor, stretching long shadows toward the rails. His hands remained still, open at his sides, rough palms facing upward. They smelled of iron dust and wooden handles, the familiar scent of tools he carried every night. Nothing in him moved with the threatening speed the kitten had learned to fear. Instead, everything about him felt patient, as if time itself loosened around his presence. A distant horn echoed through the tunnels, followed by the first tremor under the kitten's paws. He knew exactly what that meant. A train approaching, fast, heavy, merciless. Instinct screamed for him to run toward the narrow gap beneath the maintenance stairs, his usual hiding place. But the path to safety lay wide open and strangely exposed under the lantern's circle, and the vibration was growing stronger. He glanced toward the gap, then back at the man. The man wasn't chasing him. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't reaching. He was simply waiting. The train burst into view with a thunderous roar, wind whipping papers and dust into spirals across the platform. The kitten flinched and pressed himself low to the ground, claws scraping the cold concrete. The man shielded the lantern with his arm, keeping the light from dying out, eyes fixed on the trembling little shape only a few steps away. When the train finally passed and silence rushed back in like a tide, the kitten's tiny body was still shaking. The man spoke then, quietly, like someone trying not to disturb something fragile. "You shouldn't be here alone." The kitten didn't understand the words, but the tone carried warmth different from the station's cold thunder. It was something steady, something that didn't vibrate or threaten to swallow him whole. He blinked, confused by the strange pull in his chest, curiosity blending with caution. The man slowly slid a small object across the floor toward the kitten. It bumped softly into a discarded paper cup and stopped. It was a piece of jerky, wrapped earlier in a square of brown paper. The scent drifted through the cold air, warm enough to make the kitten's stomach twist painfully. Hunger always won, but fear tried to win too. The kitten crept 1 inch, then froze. Another inch. Another tremor through his thin frame. The man didn't move. He only lowered his gaze to look less imposing. The lantern's glow flickered, painting the kitten's scar in a faint golden line. The kitten reached the jerky, sniffed, and took the smallest bite possible. The taste shook him. Real food, not scraps, not trash, not cold leftovers stolen from behind the cafeteria. The man's breath escaped in a quiet sigh that rose like mist into the dim station. "There you go," he whispered, more to reassure the tiny creature than himself. The kitten ate another piece, then another. His tail trembled as he crouched lower, trying to look smaller in case the kindness suddenly turned into danger. But it didn't. Not this time. A gust of wind swept through the station, rattling a loose sign above them, and the kitten darted back into the shadows. The man didn't follow. Instead, he smiled faintly and stood, brushing dust from his knees, picking the lantern back up. "See you tomorrow then," he murmured, as he walked toward the maintenance corridor. From the shadows, 2 small eyes watched him go, wide and unblinking. For the first time in his short life, the kitten wondered what it would feel like if someone actually came back. The next night arrived with a colder wind slicing through the station's long corridors, carrying scraps of newspaper that fluttered like tired wings. The kitten emerged cautiously from his shelter beneath the metal stairs, his scar aching in the chill. He expected the same emptiness as always, the clatter of boots from workers who never looked down, the echo of rolling wheels, the buzzing fluorescent lights that hummed like distant insects. But something felt different tonight. A scent lingered in the air, the same faint warmth of rust, wood, and the man's jacket. The kitten crept forward, paws silent on the concrete. His eyes scanned for danger first, always danger, but alongside the danger, an unfamiliar thread of expectation tugged at him. The lantern's glow was nowhere yet, but the kitten felt it coming the way he felt the vibration of trains long before they arrived. A whistle shrieked in the distance. The kitten tensed, not from fear this time, but from the fear of disappointment. Then he saw it, a beam of warm, trembling light rounding the corner before the man appeared behind it. The lantern cast its long oval across the floor, and within its reach lay another piece of jerky wrapped neatly in brown paper. The man set his toolbox down, its wooden handle, his second anchor object, tapped softly against the metal frame, and took a knee. His breath formed small clouds in the cold air. "I stayed here," he said softly. "Guess that means I should too." The kitten stepped halfway into the lantern's glow. Halfway was safe. Halfway meant escape was still possible. But his stomach twisted again, hunger carving through hesitation like claws inside his ribs. The man gently pushed the jerky closer with one finger. "It's yours," he whispered. The kitten ate, faster this time, though he checked the man's hands between every bite. When the food was gone, he lingered, not to beg for more, but because something felt strangely warm near the lantern. The heat radiating from it softened the stiffness in his paws, and eased the ache in his scar. But warmth could be a trap. The kitten backed up one step, then froze, torn between instinct and a pull he didn't have a name for. The man didn't try to touch him. Instead, he sat on a nearby concrete block and opened his toolbox, pulling out a cloth-wrapped object that looked old and heavy. He unfolded it slowly, revealing a pocket-sized notebook with worn edges, another anchor object, tucked away like a secret piece of his life. "You know," he began quietly, flipping the notebook open, "I used to come here with someone." The kitten's ears flicked toward the sound. The man kept speaking, voice steady but threaded with something fragile. "She liked watching the trains, said it made her feel like the world was always moving even when life wasn't." He paused. The lantern flickered. "She's gone now, but I still walk the same path. Habit, I guess." The kitten didn't understand the words, but he felt the heaviness, felt the weight in the man's tone the same way he felt thunder vibrating under the tracks. Silence settled. A passing freight train roared by, shaking dust from the rafters. The man waited until the noise faded before closing the notebook and tucking it away. "Well, I'll see you again," he said as he stood. The kitten watched him leave, head tilted, tail curled close to his body. The lantern glow shrank as the man walked deeper into the station, but for the first time, the kitten didn't feel swallowed by darkness when it disappeared. Instead, he crawled forward and pressed his tiny body against the warm spot where the lantern had rested. And he stayed there a long time. The third night came with rain. Heavy, relentless rain that hammered the station roof and turned puddles into trembling mirrors. Thunder rolled overhead in long waves, and the air smelled of damp metal and storm-soaked electricity. Water dripped through a crack in the ceiling above the kitten's hiding spot, splashing onto his back and forcing him out into the open. He hated rain. It masked sounds, blurred scents, made the world feel unstable beneath his paws. But he had to find shelter and food. His thin fur clung to his small frame, and the scar on his paw burned like fire in the cold. He hurried toward the maintenance platform, the only place where the ground rose high enough to stay dry. But halfway there, lightning split the sky and rattled the entire station. Loud. Too loud. The kitten panicked and darted blindly, heart hammering. Then the lantern's glow cut through the wet darkness. The man was running, not walking, running. His boots splashed through widening puddles, and the lantern swung wildly, throwing frantic arcs of light across the station walls. "There you are," he called, voice tight with worry. The kitten froze, drenched and shivering, his tiny frame trembling uncontrollably. Water rolled down his whiskers. The man knelt fast, lantern slamming onto the concrete beside him, casting a bright circle that washed over the kitten. "You're soaked. You're freezing, buddy." He extended his jacket, thick, warm, heavy with the scent the kitten now recognized. The kitten stepped back out of fear, claws sliding on the wet ground. But another gust of icy wind struck him, pushing him toward the lantern's glow. He looked at the jacket, then at the man, then at the rain pounding the platform like hundreds of claws, and something inside him cracked open just enough. He moved forward. Shaking so violently his steps looked like stumbles, the kitten pressed his tiny head against the jacket, desperate for warmth, for stillness, for anything that wasn't cold and noise and terror. The man wrapped him gently, slow enough not to startle him, but firm enough to shield him from the storm. "There you go," he murmured. "I've got you." The kitten didn't run. He didn't hide. He didn't even look back at the darkness he came from. He just stayed. For the first time in his life, he let himself be held. The storm dragged deep into the night, turning the station into a cavern of dripping echoes and trembling steel. The man carried the wrapped kitten toward the maintenance room, each step careful, steady, deliberate. The lantern swung beside him, its glow bouncing across the wet floor in long arcs. The kitten's shivers slowly eased inside the thick jacket, though his tiny heart continued to race, as if unsure whether safety was real or another trick of the night. Inside the maintenance room, the air was warmer, faintly, but enough to soften the edge of the storm's fury. Old tools lined the walls, their wooden handles dulled by years of use. Coils of rope hung from hooks. A radio sat silent on a shelf. The room smelled of oil, damp metal, and the faint sweetness of sawdust. It was the man's world, built from years of routine, and now the kitten entered it as something fragile, uncertain, but no longer entirely alone. The man placed the lantern on a crate, removed his soaked gloves, and carefully unwrapped the jacket. The kitten blinked under the sudden brightness, his fur pressed flat against his small frame, his eyes reflecting fear and exhaustion. The man didn't reach for him. Instead, he spread the jacket open on the table, creating a nest of warmth. "You can stay right there," he said quietly. "No one's gonna bother you here." The kitten hesitated for a long moment. Instinct told him to flee. Every memory he held seemed sharpened by hunger, cold, or the threat of harm. But warmth mattered. Warmth was survival. So he curled into the jacket, sinking into the thick folds, letting his trembling body rest on something softer than concrete for the first time in his life. The man turned away to give him space. He moved with slow, careful motions, setting tools to dry, shaking water from his hair, wiping rain from his arms. Each action felt gentle, despite the roughness carved into his hands. A faint meow rose behind him, small, hesitant. He froze. The kitten had lifted his head, eyes blinking slowly, breath still unsteady. He wasn't calling for food or warmth, he was calling for reassurance. The man stepped closer, then stopped halfway, lowering himself to the floor instead of leaning over the table. He kept his posture small, almost humble. "I'm here," he said softly. The kitten's tail twitched, curling closer to his side. A beat passed, then another. The storm roared outside, thunder rolling along the roof. But inside that tiny room, the world held still. The man reached for something in his toolbox, a small square of folded cloth. When he unfolded it, the kitten's eyes narrowed with curiosity. Inside was a soft, tiny towel, clean and worn around the edges. The man had used it once to polish delicate parts of older machines, but it had always been kept separate, as if it mattered more than the others. He offered it now, not by pressing it onto the kitten, not by making a sudden gesture, but by placing it gently inside the jacket's curve, letting it become part of the warmth the kitten already accepted. "You deserve dry fur," he whispered. The kitten sniffed the towel, then let the man dab lightly at the rain-soaked patches along his back. Every touch was slow, deliberate, spaced enough that the kitten could choose to move away. But he didn't. Not tonight. The man cleaned him carefully, removing the cold that clung to his fur. When he reached the thin scar on the kitten's paw, the kitten tensed, but the man paused immediately, allowing him to relax before continuing. "Poor little guy," he murmured. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Outside, lightning burst across the sky, illuminating the station windows in a white flash. The kitten flinched, but the man rested one hand near, not touching, just there, creating a stillness the kitten found strangely grounding. The storm passed slowly, but it passed. By the time the rain softened into a distant drizzle, the kitten had stopped trembling. His breaths came deeper, steadier. His eyes half closed as he sank deeper into the jacket's warmth. The man exhaled, the tension in his shoulders melting away. He reached for the lantern, dimmed the flame, and sat against the wall with a long sigh. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been alone for a long time too." The kitten's ear flicked toward him, as if understanding the shape of loneliness, even if he didn't understand the words. And for the first time since either of them had arrived in that station, neither of them felt like the night was something to endure alone. Morning crept in slowly, leaking pale gold through the station doors. When the man finally stood, stretching stiff muscles from a night without sleep, the kitten stirred inside the jacket, blinking up at him. "Well," the man said softly, "I guess this means breakfast." He placed a small dish near the table, filled with whatever he could find, small cuts of leftover chicken from his lunchbox. The kitten approached cautiously, but without fear, eating with quiet hunger. When he finished, he looked up at the man, tail swishing low and slow. A choice, a fragile one, but real. The man opened the maintenance room door a crack. Cold morning air drifted in. "You can go if you need to," he said. "I won't stop you." The kitten stared at the open path. The station waited beyond it, vast, loud, dangerous, familiar. Then he looked back at the jacket, at the man, at the glow of the lantern resting nearby. He stepped forward, not toward the door, toward the man. And with that small step, the entire story began to shift into something neither of them expected. The man's breath caught when the kitten chose him over the open station. Not dramatically, just a quiet pull in his chest, the kind that happens when something broken finally shows a piece of trust it has never given before. He lowered himself slowly, resting on one knee so he wouldn't tower over the tiny creature. The kitten approached with measured steps, his paws still unsure, his tail twitching in small arcs of hesitation and courage. "You're really staying," the man whispered, voice barely above the hum of the station lights. The kitten touched his nose to the man's boot, a soft, almost invisible gesture, but a gesture nonetheless. An acknowledgement, a beginning. The man let out a small laugh, the first warm sound to break through the morning chill. He extended his hand, open and steady. The kitten sniffed, blinked twice, then pressed his cheek against the rough palm. It was not affection, not yet. It was need. Need for warmth, for presence, for something safer than concrete and thunder. The man exhaled sharply, emotion tightening his throat. "All right," he said softly. "Let's take this one step at a time." He lifted the kitten gently, careful to support the tiny scarred paw, and set him inside a cardboard box lined with an old flannel shirt. The kitten circled once, testing the softness, then curled into a small ball, eyes half closing with exhaustion. The station speakers crackled above them. A shift announcement echoed through the hall. The day crew would arrive soon. The man glanced toward the entrance, tension flickering across his face. Day crews meant noise. Day crews meant movement. Day crews meant danger for anything as small and fragile as the kitten. "I can't leave you here during daytime chaos," he murmured. "Not with the carts moving, not with the morning rush." He looked at the box again. The kitten's eyes were closing. He trusted the warmth. He trusted the moment. He trusted the man, not fully, but enough. The man made his decision. He picked up the box, tucking it close to his chest, the kitten barely stirring. He grabbed the lantern, dimmed the flame, and slipped out of the maintenance room before the first wave of workers entered the floor. His boots echoed in slow, careful steps as he carried the small life through the quiet back corridor that led to the staff lot behind the station. Outside, the sky was still silver from the fading storm. Puddles reflected broken patches of sunrise. The man's truck sat alone in the far corner, paint chipped, windows fogged from the cold. He opened the passenger door and set the box gently on the seat. The kitten lifted his head, ears twitching in confusion as the scent of upholstery and gasoline washed over him. Vehicles were unfamiliar. The world outside the station was unfamiliar. His heart sped up. "It's okay," the man said, settling behind the wheel. "It's just us now." He started the engine. Slowly, so the vibration wouldn't frighten the kitten too much. The kitten pressed himself low inside the shirt, trembling at the unfamiliar rumble. The man rested one hand on the box, not touching him, just being there. "You're not going back to that cold floor," he promised quietly. "Not if I can help it." He drove through empty morning streets, each turn gentle, each bump cushioned with a hand braced near the box to keep the kitten steady. The kitten's trembling eased with time, replaced by a soft curiosity whenever the truck slowed near intersections. He peeked out over the flannel, watching sunlight paint long streaks across the dashboard. A new world, a frightening one, but warmer than the station. The man's home sat on a quiet street shadowed by old maples, their leaves dripping from the storm. He parked, lifted the box carefully and carried the kitten toward a modest house with a porch railing, repaired one piece at a time. When he unlocked the door, the smell of wood polish and coffee drifted out, not harsh, not cold, familiar, lived in. The kitten blinked up at him, overwhelmed by scents, colors, brightness. "Welcome," the man murmured. "It's not much, but it's safe." He set the box on a woven rug near the couch. The kitten stepped out slowly, cautious paw after cautious paw, nose twitching with every new smell. A bookshelf lined the wall, a worn coat hung by the door. A small plant sat by the window, wilted but trying. This place held quiet in every corner. The kitten wandered in small circles, tail close to his body. The man let him explore without following, giving him space to define the world on his own terms. Then the kitten found something. A small wooden picture frame lying face down beneath the coffee table. The man noticed too late to stop him. The kitten nudged the corner, flipping it over. The glass was cracked slightly, but the picture was clear. The man standing beside a young woman with bright eyes and a soft smile. The same woman he had spoken of in the station. He froze, not because the kitten touched it, but because seeing the image again pulled at wounds he had tucked deep under routine. The kitten sat beside the frame looking up at him, a shared loneliness. a shared history of loss, one understood in memories, the other in instinct. The man cleared his throat, voice rough. "She loved strays," he whispered. "Used to bring them home all the time. Guess I'm doing the same now." He moved to pick up the frame, but the kitten stepped onto his boot. A tiny, silent claim. The man held still, overwhelmed by how such a small creature could soften something he believed long numb. "You're staying," he said again, this time not a question. The kitten's tail flicked once, the closest thing to yes he had ever given. The man set the cracked picture frame gently on the table, careful not to disturb the kitten still perched on his boot. The tiny creature's weight was barely there, almost imaginary, yet it grounded him more than anything had in years. He lowered himself slowly to the floor, sitting cross-legged so he could meet the kitten at eye level without crowding him. "You picked quite a moment to show up," he murmured. The kitten blinked, then stepped off his boot and padded toward the man's knee. His movements were still hesitant, every muscle primed for flight, but he no longer carried the rigid tension of a creature who expected every gesture to end in danger. Here everything smelled warm, everything looked soft, everything felt possible. The man extended one finger and let it rest on the rug. The kitten approached, sniffed, then rubbed his cheek lightly against it, a tiny instinctive gesture of acceptance. The man closed his eyes for a heartbeat. He hadn't realized how much he needed that. He stood and moved to the kitchen, leaving the kitten to explore. He didn't want to overwhelm him with attention. He simply filled a small bowl with fresh water and placed it beside another with soft food. The clink of ceramic caught the kitten's ear. For a moment he froze, then hunger nudged him forward. He approached the bowls cautiously, glancing back at the man twice, as if making sure permission hadn't vanished. When he finally began to eat, his tiny shoulders relaxed and his tail, curled enough to sway once. "You eat like you haven't had a real meal in days," the man whispered. The kitten didn't stop, didn't look up. Survival had shaped him. Routine would reshape him, but slowly. When he finished, he wandered toward the living room again, this time exploring small corners more deliberately. He found the edge of the couch, the base of the bookshelf, the shadows under the table. Everything smelled of wood, warmth, and the faint, lingering scent of that woman in the picture frame. Something sweet, something soft, something the kitten didn't understand, but trusted instinctively. The man watched him with quiet awe, arms folded loosely, shoulders slumped with the exhaustion of a night spent protecting something so small. "You need a name," he said softly. The kitten paused, turning his head, as if he sensed the importance of the moment. The man stepped closer, crouching near him again. "You showed up in a storm, survived metal tracks, and kept walking even when the cold wanted you gone." He reached out slowly. The kitten didn't run. The man brushed a finger under his chin. "I'll call you Tracks," he whispered. The kitten blinked once, then pressed his head into the man's hand, sealing the name with the smallest gesture of trust. The next few hours unfolded quietly, like the house itself was relieved to have something gentle moving inside its walls again. Tracks explored with growing confidence, sniffing floorboards, batting at the loose corner of a rug, jumping backward when his own reflection caught him by surprise in the darkened television screen. The man laughed softly, the kind of laugh that had once been common in this house, but had grown rare since the woman in the picture frame was gone. "You're really bringing this place back to life," he said. Tracks flicked his tail, uninterested in the sentiment but eager to chase a dust mote drifting through a beam of morning sun. When the man finally stepped away to shower and change out of his rain-soaked clothes, Tracks followed him to the hallway. Not too close, not too far. Close enough to prove he didn't want to be left behind. "You can come in," the man said, holding the bathroom door open a crack. Tracks sat at the threshold, watching steam rise from the hot water. The warm air softened the tightness in his scar again. He curled his tail around his paws, content to wait. When the man emerged in dry clothes, Tracks stood, arched his back, and stretched as if waking from a nap. "All right," the man smiled. "Guess you're sticking to my heels now." Tracks walked past him, tail brushing lightly against the man's leg, the kitten version of a declaration. Later that afternoon, the man returned to the station for his next shift. But this time he didn't go alone. Tracks rode in the box again, though now he occasionally peeked out, emboldened by the familiar scent of the man's jacket placed inside with him. The truck rumbled down the road, and Tracks watched from the small window in the box, ears perked, eyes sharp. The station looked different now, less like a battlefield, more like a memory he had survived. The man carried the box into the maintenance room. "You'll stay here tonight," he whispered, setting it gently on a padded mat he'd placed earlier. Safe, warm, close. Trax climbed out and sniffed every corner of the room. The lantern glowed faintly on a shelf. His flannel nest waited near the toolbox. The air smelled just like the night he was rescued, minus the storm. He turned a slow circle, testing the space. Then he lay down, not just for a nap, for belonging. The man knelt beside him, resting one hand near, not touching, letting the kitten decide. Trax stretched forward and pressed his little forehead against the man's wrist. A tiny bond, a quiet promise, a life shifting in real time. And in that maintenance room, lit by a lantern glow and wrapped in the calm hum of distant tracks, the man felt something he hadn't felt in years. Home rebuilding itself. Days passed, and the rhythm of life settled into something neither Trax nor the man had ever expected. The station no longer felt like a place of danger for the kitten, not because the world had grown kinder, but because he was no longer facing it alone. Every shift began the same way now, the man placing his toolbox on the ground, checking the lantern's wick, and setting up a small resting spot for Trax in the corner of the maintenance room. And every shift ended with the kitten curling up inside the man's jacket, purring so softly, it felt like breathing layered on top of breathing. Trax grew stronger. His scar no longer burned when the cold crept in. The warmth of the maintenance room and the man's steady presence soothed something deeper than the wound itself. He explored with more confidence, hopping onto workbenches and climbing crates, as if mapping the world he would now protect in return. The man watched him from the corner of his eye, pretending not to smile whenever the kitten stumbled from misjudging a jump or startled himself by knocking over a screwdriver. One evening, as a slow dusk settled over the station, a group of day workers gathered near the maintenance hall, talking loudly. Their boots clattered, their laughter sharp. Trax stiffened. He had learned their sounds. Unpredictable, careless, the kind of noise that had shaped his earliest memories of fear. He backed up under a bench, fur puffing, tail tucked. The man placed a steady hand on the toolbox and called softly, "Trax, hey, you're safe." The kitten peeked out, eyes huge. The man moved closer, slow, patient, blocking the view of the noisy workers with his body. "You don't have to be afraid of them anymore." Trax swallowed hard in kitten instinct, but he stepped forward anyway. One paw, then another, finally curling himself between the man's boots, pressing against his leg. The man froze, not out of fear but out of awe. Trust. Real, deliberate trust. Given, not taken. That night, the station unexpectedly plunged into semi-darkness. A transformer blew a few streets away, causing half the lights to blink out, leaving only emergency strips glowing like thin veins of gold across the concrete. The tunnels echoed differently in the dark, louder, deeper, the kind of sound that could swallow a small creature whole. Trax panicked. His breath quickened. His paws skidded across the ground. The absence of light reminded him of nights hiding beneath platforms, chased by instincts sharpened through hunger and fear. He bolted across the room. "Trax!" the man called, lantern in hand as he ran after him. The kitten darted toward the rails, the one place the man feared most. A deep vibration surged through the floor. A train was coming. The man sprinted. Trax reached the platform edge and froze as the ground trembled beneath him. Panic slammed into him. He couldn't think. He couldn't hear anything except the thunder rolling through the tracks. The train's horn blasted, long and brutal. The man dove forward, catching the kitten just as Trax's paws slipped on the metal grate. He pulled him close, rolling both of them onto the safe platform as the train roared past, wind ripping through the air like a living creature made of speed and steel. Trax trembled violently, claws gripping the man's shirt, burying his face in the fabric. The man held him tight, arms curled protectively around the tiny body that shook as if lightning lived inside him. "You're okay," the man whispered, breath shaky from fear. I've got you, buddy." The kitten let out a broken, fragile sound. Not a meow, not a cry, something raw, a release, a collapse, a surrender. The train faded into the dark. Trax didn't move. He didn't try to run. He pressed closer, trusting the man's heartbeat more than the world around him. After the chaos settled, the man carried Trax back to the maintenance room, holding him against his chest as if protecting a spark that might go out if exposed to the wrong wind. Trax clung to him, shaking softly, burying himself inside the jacket the way he once hid beneath metal stairs. The man sat on the floor, lantern flickering beside them, and stroked the kitten's back with careful, slow movements. "You're not going back to those tracks again," he whispered. "Not as long as I'm here." Trax lifted his head. His eyes were still wide with fear, but something else flickered inside them. Recognition. He touched his scarred paw to the man's wrist. A gesture, a promise. A bond sealed by darkness and danger. "You and me," the man whispered. "We're a team now." For the first time since the woman in the photo frame had left this world, the man felt whole. Not healed, but no longer hollow. Trax crawled into his lap, curled up tightly, and fell asleep against his chest. Outside, the emergency lights flickered back to life. Inside, the lantern glowed steady, one life no longer alone, another finally learning to breathe again. Over the next weeks, word spread among the workers. The maintenance guy had a tiny guardian. Trax became a quiet legend, slipping between crates and resting atop the man's toolbox as he repaired machinery. Some workers left bits of food near the hallway as cautious offerings, but the man was careful, always watching, ensuring no one overwhelmed the kitten. Trax learned patterns: the rumble of morning freight, the whistle of the commuter line, the hum of the vending machine when the man bought his midnight coffee, the soft whistle the man used to call him. Low, warm, the sound that meant safety. Their lives settled into a shared rhythm. But one night, everything shifted. A supervisor visited. He spotted Trax curled on the man's jacket and frowned. "You know pets aren't allowed on property," he said sharply. "This is a liability." The man straightened. He wasn't confrontational, but something in him solidified, like steel cooling in place. "He's not a pet," he answered. "He's part of the team." Trax stepped behind the man's leg, peeking out with wide, fearful eyes. The supervisor huffed. "He can't stay here." The man lowered his voice, steady, but carrying years of grief and resilience. "He has nowhere else, and I'm not leaving him outside in the cold." The supervisor held his stare for a long moment, then shook his head and walked away, muttering under his breath but offering no further threat. The man exhaled. Trax pressed himself closer, rubbing his face against the back of the man's boot. "You're safe," the man whispered. "I'm not letting anyone take you." Trax believed him. And for the first time, the world felt shaped not by survival, but by belonging. Winter arrived with a sharp bite that turned every breath into a small ghost in the air. The station's concrete floors grew colder, the vents rattled with drafts, and the metal rails hummed with icy tension. But for the first time in Trax's life, cold did not mean fear. The man brought a thick blanket to the maintenance room, lining a wooden crate to build a proper bed. Trax inspected it with ceremonial caution, then kneaded it with tiny paws until he approved, curling into the warmth like it was something he finally deserved. Nights followed a new rhythm, not survival, but routine. Trax perched on the workbench while the man repaired broken switches. He patrolled the room's perimeter with the seriousness of a soldier half his size. When the man opened his lunchbox, Trax sat politely at his feet, waiting for the soft click of the lid before accepting a small offering. They didn't need many words. Their bond was built on presence, on silent promises, on shared nights where the storm outside only strengthened what formed inside. But the world has a way of testing every fragile miracle. One icy evening, a child wandered onto the platform, lost, shivering, crying. Trax's ears shot up first, his instincts sharpened by the life he had known before safety found him. He paced at the door, meowing urgently, tail low, signaling something was wrong. The man noticed immediately. "What is it, buddy?" Trax darted out into the hall, pausing only to make sure the man followed. He led him toward the platform, stopping at the top of the stairs, his body tight with urgency. That's where they found her. A little girl in a thin coat, hugging herself against the cold, tears staining her cheeks. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her backpack lay on the ground, half open, its contents scattered across the concrete. The man crouched down. "Hey, are you all right? Are you lost?" The girl nodded through sobs. "My mum, sis, she got on the train. I tripped. The door closed. I didn't make it." Trax moved closer, his small form gentle, almost invisible against the station lights. The girl saw him and sniffed, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "Kitty," she whispered. Trax approached step by step, tail low but steady. He rubbed his cheek against her shoe, a gesture he rarely gave anyone but the man. The girl's trembling eased as she reached down, fingers brushing his fur with hesitant wonder. "It's okay," the man said softly. "We'll call the station master and get your mom back here. You're safe." The little girl picked up Trax and held him against her chest. Trax didn't struggle. He rested there, warm and still, letting his presence anchor her as the world around her spun out of control. She clung to him like a blanket of comfort, and the man watched in quiet awe. Trax wasn't just surviving anymore. He was helping someone else survive. They brought the girl to the office, the man staying with her the entire time. Trax sat in her lap, purring softly, something he rarely did in public. The girl stroked his fur with the careful tenderness of someone who desperately needed something soft to hold. An announcement echoed over the speakers 20 minutes later, a mother searching for her missing child. The girl's face lit with relief, hope returning like a spark rekindled. When the mother arrived running, sobbing her daughter's name, Trax slipped off the girl's lap to give her space. The reunion was loud, emotional, overwhelming, but Trax stayed close, his small body serving as a steady anchor through the chaos. The mother dropped to her knees, hugging her daughter so tightly, it looked as if she feared the world might take her again. When she looked up at the man, tears shining in her eyes, she whispered, "Thank you so much. You saved her." He shook his head and glanced at Trax. "We saved her." Trax lifted his head, meeting the mother's gaze with solemn seriousness. The little girl hugged him once before her mother took her hand. "I'll never forget you," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. Trax blinked slowly, the kitten equivalent of a promise. After they left, the man sat on a bench outside the maintenance room, letting the weight of the moment settle. Trax jumped beside him, curling against his thigh. "So you did good, buddy," the man murmured, resting a hand gently on Trax's back. "Better than good. You helped bring someone home." Trax purred, not loud but steady. The man felt it vibrate through the cold evening air. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something new, a small round metal tag attached to a collar. It was simple, unadorned, but polished with intention. Trax sniffed it curiously. "I made this," the man said. "Been working on it during breaks." He slipped the collar around Trax's neck, fastening it gently. The tag read, "Trax, home." The kitten sat taller, chest lifting. The collar didn't frighten him. It felt like something he'd been moving toward since the night he first saw the lantern glow. A marker of belonging, a symbol of being wanted, a promise of a life beyond survival. The man stroked his head. "You're not a stray anymore," he whispered. "You're family." Trax leaned into his palm, closing his eyes as if sealing the truth inside his tiny heart. The winter deepened, but the cold no longer mattered. Trax had blankets, he had food, he had the man's jacket every night, and he had a home, not just a place, but a life built out of second chances and quiet courage. One night, as snow drifted outside, the man sat in his living room repairing a lantern hinge. Trax curled on his lap, breathing softly. The picture frame of the woman remained on the table, but now there was something new beside it. A photo taken on the station platform, the man sitting with Trax perched proudly on his shoulder. A new memory, a new beginning, a new chapter. The man looked down at Trax. "You saved me too," he whispered. Trax purred, eyes half closed, warm and safe. And in that small house on that quiet street, a kitten abandoned by the world finally found what every lost soul searches for: a place to belong, a heart to trust, a life far from the streets, a life built on love.